From Hyderabad to orbit. Tonight, Dhruva Space takes a giant leap, literally. Dhruva Space is launching LEAP-1, which stands for Launching Expeditions for Aspiring Payloads. Its first full-stack commercial satellite mission aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9. And this isn't just another satellite. It's actually the beginning of a new business model for India's private space economy. This is for sure a breakthrough. Just 2 years ago, Dhruva flew LEAP-TD, a technology demonstrator, aboard ISRO's PSLV POEM, which stands for Polar Satellite Load Vehicle PSLV Orbital Experimental Module. That small step proved Dhruva's indigenous P-30 satellite bus could actually survive in space. And today, with LEAP-1, Dhruva is going commercial. The mission carries two international payloads, Akula Tech's Nexus 01, an edge AI computer that can process data and retrain ML models in orbit. Esper Satellites OTR-2, a hyperspectral imager delivering rich Earth data for agriculture, defense, mining, disaster response, and climate monitoring. So let's actually think about this. Instead of spending years and millions building your own spacecraft, LEAP offers space as a platform. You bring the payload, Dhruva takes care of power, communications, thermal design, shielding, launch clearances, ground stations, operations. This is why LEAP is more than just a satellite. It's an orbit as a service model, a shared platform that democratizes access to space. Why is it crucial? Well, strategic value. Satellites are no longer just science projects. They are actually infrastructure for data, connectivity, and sovereignty. The commercial edge. Well, by moving from demos to customer payloads, Dhruva signals India's private sector can actually compete with global satellite operators. Policy milestone, a big one. This is happening under India's new space policy framework, with in-space enabling private players and startups like Dhruva proving they can deliver and how. And it's not just technology. Dhruva will operate LEAP-1 through its ground station as a service network and its proprietary ISOC suite, ensuring data flows seamlessly from orbit to clients worldwide. So basically, from 80 people building LEAP-TD to now 200 plus engineers delivering LEAP-1. Dhruva's journey mirrors India's leap from state-driven missions to a vibrant commercial space ecosystem. And the stakes? Well, they are high. Globally, SpaceX and Planet Labs dominate the commercial payload market. But Dhruva's LEAP model could position India as the go-to hub for affordable, modular satellite hosting. More LEAP missions are already in the pipeline with international customers. Pixel is launching 3 more Fireflies aboard Falcon 9, and it's not just Dhruva. Bengaluru-based Pixel today is launching 3 more Fireflies aboard Falcon 9, completing its first 6-satellite hyperspectral constellation. With sensors capturing over 135 spectral bands at 5 million resolution, Pixel's Fireflies promise unprecedented Earth insights from detecting, well, here goes, crop diseases to tracking gas leaks. Together, Dhruva and Pixel show how Indian startups are moving from demos to global scale constellations. And joining us tonight, well, to illuminate us on this milestone is Mr. Keyur Gandhi, Director, Space Regulatory and Commercialization at Dhruva Space. A space lawyer by training, he leads licensing, spectrum, export control, and international compliance. So Dhruva's launches align with national security and global treaties while helping shape India's private space rulebook. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing? So honored to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm doing very well. It's exciting times today. We are just about 5 hours away from our launch, so quite excited and happy to be here.
Can I call you Keyur if that's okay? Or Mr. Gandhi or sir?
Please call me Keyur.
Or should I call you the space lawyer? That sounds very, with a lot of gravitas and also quite funky and cool.
Well, the space boy would be wrong because I think I'm accompanied by the 220 of the space people, and as an ecosystem, I think we're about 3,000 plus now.
The space lawyer.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds good. All right. So first and foremost, congratulations. Before we get into it, sir, I just have to, of course, say and ask you, what's the feeling like? You just said 5 hours away. So what's the feeling like?
The the feeling is very I don't know how to put it into words. You've got me with the right question in the beginning. It's a mix of feelings because this what culminates into what's going to happen today has been 4 years of relentless work in doing technology demonstration missions while we've been waiting as a company since 2012 to make this day happen. For us, today won't just mark the launch of a satellite, it would mark the liftoff of India's space economy with the kind of mission profile that's there on the launch vehicle today.
Well, no wonder you're a director at Dhruva Space because you just put it so brilliantly and so succinctly. So I think I have definitely understood how excited and happy you are, and so are all the people who are watching. So let's actually dive into this. So here goes. So basically, from launch to operating model, let's move from the spectacle to the systems that actually make it to scale. So basically, sir, from which is basically a polar satellite launch vehicle, PSLV, orbital experimental module demonstration to a Falcon 9 commercial ride. India's
Yeah.
private space shifts from prototypes to paying customers. That's essentially the wait and the excitement, and finally the launch of India's space economy, as you just put it across. But I would like to ask you this right off the bat. LEAP-1 is Dhruva's first commercial mission. What does it actually represent in terms of India's private space ecosystem maturing from demonstrations to real customers? And you're only 5 hours away from such an arduous journey that you've had. So I'd love for you to shed light on that.
So this mission is a very critical marker of three things, right? One, typically we associate space with a sector which is very technically complex, and rightly so. We also see that it is the barriers to access the sector itself are very high. And the third is there are a lot of financial and regulatory challenges to make it happen.
Sure.
What we need to really focus on is 2022 is when the first private space activity was undertaken as a part of technology demonstration mission, and just 3 years later today, after a series of technology demonstration missions and a few commercial missions overall in the ecosystem, we've come to a cusp where there is global confidence in the technology that is built in
Nice.
India.
Nice.
So when we talk of what the LEAP-1 mission signifies, I think it signifies the confidence that the global ecosystem has on India, and it also signifies that there is massive potential to do things right in India if the government, the private sector, and the global ecosystem comes together.
So basically, a wonderful synergy which essentially makes sure that the customers are aboard. But actually, then the bar starts to move towards compliance and cadence, which is, well, the rule book, which is actually your wheelhouse. So, well, policy opened the door. Export control, spectrum, licensing, and liability still actually set the pace to orbit. So, here is my actual question to you, which is you often say space law is actually about making the complex very, very simple. What were the key regulatory hurdles that Dhruva faced in bringing LEAP-1 to launch? And how has India's new space policy, plus in space's framework, changed the game for the startups?
So this is a very interesting domain to explore and actually right up my alley, what I do day in and day out. When we talk of easing access to space, we often instantly think of the complexity and the cost that is associated with going into space. But there's a very critical part in the space sector, since it is highly regulated. You have multiple
Sure,
concerns like you pointed out. So
sure.
there's an inherent goal to achieve of also easing the regulatory hurdles, which
Hmm.
is not a one-way street; it's a two-way street. Uh, you need to understand what you're doing, whether it is in national interest or not. You need to
Hmm.
make sure that as a company you don't just uh, trust, but you also verify and you take the right steps to address broadly the concerns which give rise to the necessity to have this domain regulated. And when
Sure.
you're doing that, of course, in space plays a very big role, because it's not just about promoting ease of doing business. When we started conceptualizing LEAP-1 and when we had started working on this mission, we were at a juncture where some of the critical norms, guidelines, and procedures were also yet to come, and we were sort of working very closely with the government to understand how we should really place this right. Now, to add to a layer of complexity to this, typically people would ideate and think about having one's own satellite and providing services using your own
Hmm.
satellite.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
then you bring some more countries into the mix.
Yeah.
So the
Just
way
changes the playbook and the landscape completely.
Precisely. So with this mission, it's also been a critical landmark in promoting and trying out a new kind of framework that
Hmm.
now we anticipate will be scalable, because it makes the life for the customer, which is our hosted payload customers, for us and for the government much simpler. To give a cue to this, InSpace has also announced a dedicated satellite bus as a service program, which very
Hmm.
closely aligns with the concept of hosted payload missions. So that's how
Yeah.
scalable and potent this concept is, and that's how structured the framework has grown to become within the Indian policy and regulatory context.
Actually, Keyur, I wanted to actually ask you this before I move on from towards the global aspect of things, since of course the clearances at home have been done, which is an imperative factor. But before I get into that, I actually wanted to ask you. You said that there was a lot of work that was done with the government very closely, and something like this is a very dynamic and constantly evolving aspect, as you're encountering laws which are probably maybe going through a lot of iterations as you're going along. Did you see that evolution constantly taking place, and did that maybe help you to reach a point today after 3 years, because it's quite quick in terms of maybe all of the compliances and everything that might have come through, because everyone is gaining knowledge. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, let's look at it this way: when we are trying to see how evolving the framework is and how dynamic the ecosystem itself is.
Sure.
Earlier, to take a point of comparison, the ecosystem itself is moving towards satellites that are meant for a shorter time period, because technology is becoming redundant that fast due to continuous
Mm-hmm.
innovation. On the
Mm-hmm.
launch side, we are seeing a lot of growing capabilities and a lot of growing investments, so that
Mm-hmm.
more and more assets can go into orbit super fast. On the ground segment too, we are seeing a lot of innovation, especially on the software and of course the hardware side as well. So when we put all of this together, we are looking at a dynamic list of possibilities as to how the next few missions could go from a global perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, we are also anticipating an increased impetus on how satellite data is used. To give an example, again, data is also something highly regulated, be it satellite
Sure.
imagery,
Sure.
satellite communication systems.
And also, maybe if I might add, Keyur, to this, the fact that the compliances are also constantly getting regulated along with everything else. And it's very important, I hope. I mean, in terms of the law constantly changing, or for that matter, you working very closely with the government for it to keep going through that
Absolutely.
process.
Absolutely, and it's a very wide variety too. So, to give an example, the same satellite, which Earth observation satellite with a camera, which is
Hmm.
used to support disaster warnings, which is used to support agricultural use cases, which is used to support urban planning, is also the
Hmm.
same satellite that could be used for the purposes of defense, for example, like in
Correct.
Operation Sindoor. So, the law has to evolve with this. and we are seeing that happen very, very fast. And in India, I think one of the biggest promises in the space sector today can be of the framework evolving with time uh, very fast, where sometimes I think one of the examples could also be poignant that some of the frameworks have evolved to a level where the private sector might take longer to catch up.
Wow, wow, that's quite a clarion statement, I must say. Of course, it's very encouraging what you just mentioned, Keyur, regarding the fact that the government is also moving as quickly, if not quicker, to make sure that the evolution is taking place and it's taking place at a brisk pace. Of course, now coming back to this aspect which I had mentioned earlier, which is of course the global pitch, which is a very important facet. And in terms of the widening of that particular lens, LEAP-1 now carries international payloads from Australia. How do you see India's private space companies competing and collaborating with global players like SpaceX, Planet Labs, or Rocket Lab?
So this is a very interesting question. I think today the sentiment has always been that everyone should indigenize, make capabilities within the country, and rightly so, because we need strategic economy to occur. But there's another side to this, especially in a sector like space. I can't think of any example of a company or a space agency that is built in isolation.
Sure.
To bring it back to our example of Dhruva Space, here we provide a full stack service. So there's a very wide moat of technologies and solutions that we are working on. But of course, it is not possible for a single player to do all of this. In fact,
Sure.
we have one of the biggest network of partners globally, where we have a vertically integrated value chain so that we can serve the customers right. With putting this in context, I think when we look at global competition, today there's a very big untapped potential of satellite data being used, which is
Yeah.
driving up the demand. So the market is significant enough for uh, everyone to make those additional investments, have incredible amount of cooperation to work with each other, and we are seeing these synergies grow one after the other. So LEAP-1 could be a classic example of that, where we are seeing companies which are interested in providing downstream applications to a launch service provider in the US, to other allied customers who would benefit from the mission, and our own technology development roadmap, which also incorporates some partners with whom we've worked on some critical subsystems. Each mission has a very intricate value chain which spans across the globe. So when we compare it with the rest of the globe, I think only a common statement that we should all sort of look forward to is that at one point we hope that the Indian space economy also grows to the size and the extent and to the
Beautifully put.
number of space assets as we have with other countries.
Beautifully put. So essentially, obviously, that brings me to this, Keyur, which is global credibility actually grows faster when domestic demand is actually made institutional. Which as you had mentioned earlier as well, that with the pace at which we are growing, that's not too far off. And to talk about in space's long horizon push, first of all, I have to, of course, congratulate you and the entire team at Dhruva Space, which is actually a part of the winning Earth Observation Public Private Partnership Consortium awarded by InSpace. So, can you please tell us about one, how does that feel? And second, what does this enable industry wide in the long run? First, the congratulations and your excitement, and then, of course, the long run bit.
Yeah. So the EUPPP is one of the other critical markers for the space ecosystem as a whole. Now, in that, Dhruva Space has partnered to work predominantly on the ground segment and satellite subsystems. The ground segment forms a critical part of any space mission. In fact, on a lighter note, I think ground segment is the least fancy part of being in the space sector, and it is
Right.
often overlooked. But we understand from our experience of working on the LEAP-1 mission, and while also working on several other commercial missions that are to be launched in the coming months, that ground segment can often be a single point failure. And
Sure.
ground segment infrastructure presence is very critical to improve the latency with which we get data from the satellites, and also very critical from a cost effectiveness perspective. So in this program, what we anticipate is we will support with building global ground segment infrastructure and partnering with um, across the globe to bring better latency, to bring better ability to use the constellation and pass along its benefits to the end users.
Nice. So basically, policy backed demand is in place. The next lever is obviously trying to lower barriers, which are basically going to increase innovators' reach orbit. So, launching expeditions for aspiring payloads, LEAP, is being described as actually orbit as a service. How does this model actually lower entry barriers for startups, universities, and even defense customers who want to test technology in space but lack satellite building capacity? That's actually quite a big one.
Yeah. So the initiative Leap is actually inspired from the way we as a company sort of worked in the first couple of years. Like you
Hmm.
mentioned, we qualified our technologies extensively on the POEM platform, which is the fourth stage of PSLV repurposed into a orbital experimentation module.
Hmm.
The idea there was simple. Whenever we are building new technologies in space, you won't find users or potential customers for it until it has been extensively tested in the space environment. Now, typically what it would need for someone to be able to do that is to make a whole satellite, arrange for their own ground segment, look for the
True.
right launch opportunities and deployers, and have to make a significant investment, which probably
Yep.
makes access to space as a business very difficult. With the LEAP initiative, multiple of such payloads are sharing a similar bus where you get that experience of being in the space environment and getting detailed observations on how the payloads functioned in space
Sure.
at potentially a much lesser cost. Where because you're not independently owning and operating a satellite, the regulatory hurdles are also much lesser. And at the
Hmm.
same time, because you're working with Dhruva Space, which is doing this across multiple payload customers, you also get the experience of handling your first space mission from all perspectives, be it operational safety, uh, and a lot of background learning into making a space mission happen.
So it eases the path in a big way. Essentially, for what you've just said, Keyur, that it is easing the path, which is basically lower barriers are step one. Scaling India's share is the mission. So, in terms of the road ahead, India aims to grow its share of the global space economy from 1% today to 10% by 2040, which I'm sure is achievable. So, what role do you see Dhruva Space playing in achieving this vision? More LEAP missions, international partnerships, or even sovereign constellations?
Dhruva Space today is very uniquely positioned to take on these opportunities for three primary reasons, right? If you look at very carefully at the technology stack that we are building, it is built around being able to launch on demand, being able to launch effectively, and offer a scalable solution.
Hmm.
To give an example, we are building one of the biggest Asia's assembly integration and testing facility right here in Hyderabad. We are building platforms starting from a 30 kg class nano satellite up to 500 kg class for various kinds of missions, be it communication, Earth
Wonderful.
observation, intelligence,
Wonderful.
surveillance, and reconnaissance. The missions and the infrastructure can be used to build all of this. So today, when we are comparing India with the journey of how other countries have gone around, India has about 55 to 60 operational assets in orbit today. Uh,
Sure.
when if we compare it to our contemporary uh, competitors in the global space ecosystem,
Space.
we see them
Yeah.
having hundreds to thousands of satellites. So Dhruva Space hopes to contribute in this journey by continuing to ease access to space even further, where LEAP-1 is not just a signal of qualifying technology, but it is also a signal that there is increased reliance, reliability, and repeatability that is coming into the space missions that are being built by India for the world.
Wonderful. So, are we headed in the right direction? Are we going to hit those marks? Are we, in terms of the fact that 10% by 2040? Are we feeling happy and confident about that, Keyur?
There are a lot of things that we would have to get right to make this happen, and I
Mm,
strongly believe that we should be able to hit that mark, because let's look at any example of any other space economy. I don't think we've seen any other space economy across the world which within 3 years of beginning would have hit a mark of having a EOPPP, having a technology adaptation fund, having suborbital launch demonstrations, having operational constellations by the private sector, and having hosted payload missions, and so much more. So we are certainly moving at the right pace, and there are a lot of other critical things that we need to get right as industry and as government to make this happen.
Okay, so before I let you go, Keyur, I just have one little request of you. Um, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, of course, had spoken out. He had given a very, very clarion call, encouraging motivational call, talking about 350 plus space tech startups to look at 5 unicorns in the near future. He has actually also implored the youth to look at the astronaut programs, joining up those. So maybe taking a leaf out of the PM's book, I would like for you to maybe give a message to all of those people watching, and probably the youth which is excited, because this is a huge milestone. And I would love for it to come from a person who's only 5 hours away from such a monumental achievement.
Sure. That's okay. That's very interesting. I think I would like to leave a very short message for the audience and the ecosystem at large. Uh,
Mm,
Today, as an ecosystem, we are proving that access to space is no more difficult or complex or impossible for India. This is
mm,
all happening to enable use cases which are supported by space technology, and there
mm,
are incredible number of potential use cases where it can
mm,
benefit not the space sector but many allied sectors, starting from agriculture to disaster management to communication enabled sectors, defense, and much more.
mhm,
At this point, we should all stop and think, how can we use space to make our lives better, because that is what
mm,
the Indian space program started with. And if you have an idea to make that possible,
mhm.
Dhruva Space will stand resilient with you in your journey to make that happen.
That is wonderful. That is extremely encouraging. Thank you so much, Keyur, for joining us, shedding so much of light. And obviously, this has been truly, truly brilliant. It's a milestone for all of us. Of course, all of us wish you from AIM Network all the best. 5 hours away, and you've made India proud. And onwards and upwards in more ways than one.
Thank you so much. It was very interesting chatting with you. And I
Thank you.
hope that we would be tuning in with more updates soon on the mission.
I am so looking forward to that, because I would be more than excited to keep picking the space lawyer's brain. I look
Thank you
forward
so
to it.
much.
Thank you so much. Well, that was Mr. Keyur Gandhi. So, this is what I would like for what I could understand from this wonderful little conversation that I've had. From LEAP TD's test flight to LEAP-1's commercial debut. This journey is about more than payloads. It's about democratizing orbit access. And as Dhruva's mission patch shows, with symbols from India, Australia, and the US, this is also about global partnerships powered by Indian innovation. So, as Prime Minister Modi recently reminded India's space tech entrepreneurs, the challenge now is not just to launch satellites, but to mint 5 unicorns in the next 5 years. And as well, Keyur put it across, Dhruva is more than happy and excited to support that beautiful, brilliant, monumental effort, which is going to help us scaling from half a dozen launches a year to nearly one a week. LEAP-1 is proof that this ambition is within reach. Indian startups are no longer passengers in the space race. They are becoming platform builders who can turn policy vision into global scale businesses.